If you can't right every wrong, at least correct some of the mistakes.
You are Locked On MLB, your daily MLB podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, baseball fans. Welcome to Locked On MLB, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. This is the daily podcast. We talk about all of Major League Baseball. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully, and please let me adjust my headset. There you go. That feels a little better. Sorry about that. I have been a baseball podcaster for well over a decade now, and this is my sixth full season here at the Locked On Podcast Network. Follow us at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter or whatever it's called now. And on Instagram, I'm your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball on Twitter. Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. And if you're following us every day and you're posting on the social media, make sure you put on that hashtag EverydaySully. Believe it or not, it helps. Helps us figure out who the heck is listening and when the heck they're listening. Hey, today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at Supply House. SupplyHouse.com is a reliable way to get parts fast. Shop for your next plumbing, h-vac, or electrical job. Get fast shipping from coast to coast at SupplyHouse.com. Before we jump right into the, well, let's just be honest, very interesting story that has been coming out over the last day or so, let's head over to the trivia question. We talked a little bit about Angel Hernandez and saying goodbye to Angel. And bye. That's all. I won't be mean. Bye. Have a nice life. I said that he was an umpire in 2 different World Series and only once was the home plate umpire. When he was the home plate umpire in the 1 World Series game he ever called, who hit an iconic and, well, a staple in highlight reel World Series home runs. And a couple of people got it correct. Stephen Colatera said, well, it has to be either Kirk Gibson or Joe Carter, but I don't know which. Nope, was neither one of them. Nick W. said, was it Jeter's walk-off home run in the 2001 World Series? Nope, John Murphy Jr. got it right. It was Game 2 of the 2002 World Series where Barry Bonds hit his home run off of Francisco Rodriguez that may not have landed. It may have burnt up in the atmosphere. It's one of the most famous, certainly the most famous home run that Barry Bonds ever hit in the postseason, and was, quite a shot. And Angel Hernandez was behind the plate when it happened. Okay, let's get to the big news. There are games that are going on, of course, and a couple of things that are worth noting. Some of the games, one game specifically, we're going to talk about at the end. But a bit of news came about the other day, and that is Major League Baseball is now going to recognize the Negro Leagues in the record book and amongst their statistics. In 2020, the Major League Baseball announced that there were to be 7 of the official organized Negro Leagues that played, around 1920 through integration, would be recognized as major leagues. However, there was something, I don't know, a little eerily disappointing about the announcement in that it brought up a little bit of the separate but equal situation. In other words, they were going to be major leagues, but the stats were going to still exist on their own, separate from everything else. And there was something about that was disheartening, especially for many people like our great friend Vanessa Ivy Rose, whose grandfather is sitting right there, Hall of Famer Turkey Stearns. That it was a little bit of, once again, separate but equal, a little bit of Jim Crow going on in baseball. And it was a recognition, but still pump the brakes. You're still not part of what happened. Well, there has been either a change of heart or a change in negotiation, or change of mind, or maybe they just needed to figure out how to make it work. But it was announced that from now on, the stats will exist side by side. And I think this is an absolutely wonderful thing to happen. It doesn't solve everything. that happened in segregation. It doesn't erase all the injustices, but it helps erase some, or it helps heal some of them, because sometimes you can't solve everything. If there's something that is a major, huge problem that is irreversible, like segregation, like so many social events that have happened in the history of the country and the world, where the wounds may never completely heal, but at least heal some of them. At least get a damn Band-Aid or a tourniquet. At least try to fix what is possible to fix. And I think this is phenomenal, not just for social justice, not just because it's the right thing to do, but it's the right way to write baseball history, because it is going to include names in the discussion of baseball history that may have been excluded. And maybe by including their names, we can inject them into the conversation of who is a great player and who is not a great player. Now, this is not, as I've said many times, this is not just me trying to, my desire to try to erase as many of the wounds of segregation as possible isn't just for social reasons. It's because I'm a baseball fan. And I don't know if you've noticed this, but I'm also a fan of baseball history. I think that there is no bigger crime in the history of baseball than the segregation of the game. And there was a thing that was on Facebook a few days ago that one of the Facebook pages that I follow there, I'm old, I'm still on Facebook, but it was one of the baseball history feeds that I follow. And it said, what is the biggest what if in baseball history? And some people said, what if the Red Sox win the 86 World Series? Or what if they didn't trade Babe Ruth? Or what if the Dodgers stayed in Brooklyn? Or, what if Nelson Cruz caught that fly ball? Or, Jose Mesa didn't blow the save? A lot of different, that you'd expect. What if J.R. Richard didn't get a stroke? What if Tony Canigliaro didn't get hit in the face? What if Thurman Munson hadn't died? A lot of things like that. And I just thought there should be a caveat, which is, what is the biggest what if in baseball history other than what if baseball was integrated much earlier? Because the entire history of baseball would have been changed. Because we saw that when integration happened, some of the biggest stars in baseball were players who had played in the Negro Leagues. It wasn't just Jackie Robinson joined baseball and that was the right thing to do in terms of morality. It made baseball better. He was the most valuable player of the National League. In the first wave, you had Larry Doby and Don Newcomb and Roy Campanella, and then came the second wave, which was the Willie Mazes of the world, the Henry Aarons of the world, the Ernie Bankses of the world, the Frank Robinsons of the world, the Minnie Minosas of the world. Have you noticed that these are all pretty good players who were able to play on the level of baseball players in the major leagues? And when it got to the point where you looked around and you saw regular, look at the year I started following baseball, 79. And the question is, who is the best player in baseball? There's Jim Rice and there's Dave Parker. Would they have been able to play if there was still segregation? The answer would have been no. The Reggie Jacksons and the Tony Gwynns and the Barry Bonds and the Ken Griffey Juniors and the Ozzie Smiths, and that would go on to the players from the Caribbean whose pigment wouldn't have caught on. So say goodbye to Mariano Rivera. Say goodbye to Big Papi. Say goodbye to Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and Sr. Think of all the great players who would not have been able to be in Major League Baseball today if we were able to continue, if segregation continued. And it's reasonable to assume that if you were a great player in the Negro Leagues, you could have been a great player in the Major Leagues. And it also is reasonable to assume that the talent pool in Major League Baseball before integration was really, really shallow. People say, "Oh, the expansions, made the talent pool so thin." Really? How about going to the time where you could only get you eliminated Every player that I just mentioned, we're not interested. Not interested in Ricky Henderson. You know, not interested in Rod Carew or Sammy Sosa. All of these, Fred McGriff, Frank Thomas, not interested. Go away. Pedro Martinez, not interested. Felix Hernandez, not interested. Ronald Acuna Jr., not interested. Now, put together a team and eliminate the players like that and tell me how deep the talent pool is. It's not just because it was the right thing to do morally. It's the right thing to do in terms of the quality of baseball. And if you see some of the players who would have been playing in Major League Baseball had integration happened much, much earlier, the trajectory of teams would have been much, much different. If you had obviously the two most famous ones who played the biggest stars in the history of the Negro Leagues would be Satchel Paige and Josh Gibson. Satchel Paige wound up playing in the Major Leagues in the 40s and 50s and for one game in the 60s. By the way, the first American League team to integrate were the Cleveland Indians, which are still the last Cleveland team to win the World Series. I kind of digress. But what if Satchel Paige pitched with Dizzy Dean? Or what if Satchel Paige pitched for a franchise that was moribund, like the Phillies or the Browns? And maybe they would have won a couple of championships along the way. What if Josh Gibson was a great home run hitter, not for the Homestead Grays and the Pittsburgh Crawfords and bouncing around all over the place, but what if he was the greatest home run hitter in the history of the Boston Braves? Some of these franchises, what if they had some of the great superstars? And you know what it also does? It raised the level of play. Okay? Yes, Dizzy Dean was great, Lou Gehrig was great, and Babe Ruth was great. But what if they had to play alongside the Oscar Charlesons and the Bajum Wilsons and the Judy Johnsons of the world? It raises the game. It raises the quality of the game. And so putting the stats side by side, sure, you may say, well, were they as good as the Major Leagues? Of which I say, well, how good were the Major Leagues if you eliminated all these terrific players? When I had a Bob Kedrick from the Negro Leagues Baseball History Museum, and we've had Vanessa Ivy Rose talk about her grandpop, that's one of the main things I talked about. Forget about how good were the Negro Leagues. How good were the Major Leagues if you were eliminating superstars? Now, beyond the justice of this, there's also some repercussions that I think are going to be positive concentric circles for this rock that was thrown into this pool of injustice. Hey, let's talk a little bit about our friends over at Supply House. Get supplies for the site that's made for skilled trades. SupplyHouse.com. SupplyHouse.com is the reliable way to order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job right. Shop with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from over 400 top brands and get your order delivered to your door with fast shipping coast to coast. Need help with an order? Get expert support and industry-leading service from the friendliest folks in the business and talk to a real person every time. Pros in the skilled trades can get a competitive edge by joining SupplyHouse.com's free Trademaster program. Every Trademaster gets access to a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Join the thousands of trade pros already benefiting from their free membership at SupplyHouse.com/TM and order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from anywhere with just a few clicks at SupplyHouse.com. SupplyHouse.com. Hey, where's your hub? Where is the place that you go to for all your sports news? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed to bring you the biggest stories in sports. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channel app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. All right, one of the things that can happen when you start to include some of the stars of the Negro League alongside the stars of Major League Baseball is it opens up a discussion when you start bringing up who's the greatest leader of this or that or the other thing. So many times, players who are listed on some of these records that people are chasing are players from the days of segregation. Their numbers are still alive. So why not put in the people who also would have been playing at that time? Now, one of the ripple effects is now when you see who is the greatest batting average in the history of baseball, for years and years and years, the answer was simple: Ty Cobb. Ty Cobb. Sure. And no one is questioning the greatness of Ty Cobb. I think Ty Cobb would have been great no matter who was in there. And while Ty Cobb has a horrible reputation as someone for his racist tendencies when he was alive, enough evidence has surfaced that some of that may have been exaggerated. Al Stump, who wrote the book about what a horrible man he was towards the end of his life, portrayed him basically as a monster. And that's basically one person's point of view of a guy who was really old, really bitter, and really drunk. And I don't know if you've ever had an old drunk relative over and stories come up. They sometimes don't sound the most enlightened. Well, I can't imagine Ty Cobb would have either. But apparently during his playing days, I'm not saying he was enlightened. I'm not saying he would have had a Black Lives Matter shirt on. But he apparently was not the monster that he has been portrayed as over the years. So I think that maybe he has been vilified a little bit by one person's take of a decaying man drunk at the end of his life. But I digress. The answer now is, who is the highest batting average career? Josh Gibson. And so now when we start talking about the greatness of Josh Gibson, we can put it in some sort of context. Do you think it's not fair that he got to be there without playing a single game in the major leagues? Well, it wasn't his fault. He was only allowed to play in the major leagues. And by the way, number 3 is Oscar Charleston. Now, Oscar Charleston, as Bob Kendrick has said, and as the great Buck O'Neil has said, was probably the most talented player in the history of the Negro Leagues. People who saw him play compare him to Willie Mays. And he may have been the great contemporary alongside Babe Ruth had he been allowed to play with Babe Ruth. And Charleston has now situated himself between Ty Cobb and Rogers Hornsby. Rogers Hornsby and Ty Cobb are players whose names are on the walls of stadiums you go to right now. If you go to a game in Detroit, Ty Cobb's name is immortalized. You go to a game in St. Louis, Rogers Hornsby's name is immortalized. They exist still. Gibson isn't attached to a team like that, and Charleston isn't. That is a right that will never, that is a wrong that will never be righted. But at least we can bring their name into it. And oh, by the way, do you know who's number 5 on the all-time career batting average list? Turkey Stearns. That's right, Vanessa Ivy Rose. Your grandpa made the top 5. And there you go, with a 348 career average. Minimum 5,000 total at-bats between the American League, National League, and the Negro Leagues. And this now means that you can now include some of the names of these great players who unjustly were taken out. You can now talk about them side by side. Now, when I had Vanessa Ivy Rose on a few months ago, and I brought up what I felt was an interesting comparison when people were trying to figure out, how do you, apples and oranges or whatnot. I brought up the fact that there are several players in the Hall of Fame who have stats in their all-time stat list that were not American League and not National League. Ed Roush, who's a Hall of Famer, Joe Tinker is a Hall of Famer. Some of them played a couple of years for the Federal League. The Federal League was a very short-lived third major league that propped up in the mid-1910s. Now, the effects of that league could still be felt because the lawsuit that the Federal League put on the American League and the National League for forming a monopoly led directly to the antitrust exemption that baseball has and clings to like a koala to this very day. But if they could include Federal League stats alongside American League and National League stats, and to say, well, how good was the Federal League? Were they as good as the National League or the American League? We've never thought twice about including those stats. So let's not think twice about this. There could have been a great dynasty with the Phillies, or maybe some team could have challenged the Yankees, or maybe Josh Gibson would have been the greatest Yankee of all time. I don't know, and neither do you. But now we can start mentioning the names of these great legends when history is discussed. Baseball history is out there and brought up all the time. Hell, that we named the pitching award the Cy Young Award after Cy Young because he won 511 games in a segregated league. What were the level of hitters he was facing? I'm sure he was facing some great ones, but not all the great ones. So one person posted, if we start doing this, do we now have to include Sadaharu O in our discussions? Maybe. Maybe. As he hit all those home runs in the Japanese league. And we're starting to see with the likes of Shohei Ohtani and Ichiro Suzuki and Hideki Matsui and Hideo Nomo and all the stars, Koji Uehara, all the stars who came up from Japan. Maybe. But let's deal with one injustice at a time. This is a good thing. This is a good thing for baseball history. Does it solve everything? No, of course not. But it solves some things. And some things are better than no things. Hey, let's talk a little bit about our friends over at FanDuel. I don't know if you know anything about FanDuel, but FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. And let me tell you something. It's winner take all time with the NBA Finals. We know the Celtics are in it. Will the Mavs meet them? And guess what? If you're sick of seeing Dallas teams win, Rangers, maybe the Mavericks will, and hey, maybe the Stars will. They're winning big time in Dallas, and you're going to get your shot to win with FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. This is a reminder that Locked On has created the first ever national sports. The Locked On has created the first ever national sports streaming channel on YouTube. Doing them live. We're doing them live. And now it's available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channel app. Locked On Sports Day is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts at Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channel app. All right. By the way, some games were going on today, and some games are actually still going on right now. The Red Sox are getting beaten up by the Orioles right now. And check out Locked On A's, where we're going to figure out what happens at the end, because the A's and the Rays are currently tied. Some finals, the Rangers wound up beating the D-backs. Sanchez and the Phillies took care of business against the San Francisco Giants. Garrett pitched a solid game. Darvish did not. And the Marlins beat the San Diego Padres. The Dodgers just have been clobbering the Mets. The Mets have lost Diaz to the injured list. A 6-run 8th inning completely sunk the Mets along that way. Final score was 10-3. And the Skubal pitched great for Detroit as the Tigers blanked the Pirates in Game 1 of a doubleheader. But Paul Skeens came out and showed once again he is ready for the show. Another terrific outing from him. He struck out 9 batters and only walked 1 in 6 innings. He did let up a home run and 2 runs, but you know what? You take it. You take it. And the Pirates wound up winning, and he is an ace. Pirates are trying to right that ship. There's still 4 games under 500, but we're going to see. Maybe he can right the ship, maybe not. But certainly Paul Skeens has done his job. And we're going to see. There's a bunch of games that will be playing on tonight, and we're going to see how right now the Cubs and the Brewers are one of the more interesting games going on right now, as the Brewers would love to basically keep the Cubs at arm's distance, and the Guardians, who have jumped out to an early lead against the Rocks. So we'll see what's going to happen there. And Verlander against Kirby, It's the Astros and the Mariners are playing later. We're doing a live thing here. And, oh, yay, Lawrence Goggins, as he's a regular listener, he says, facts, Sully, which I assume he's referring to what I was saying about the Negro Leagues. And Nick W. says, checking in on my way to the ball game. Mariners are going for 3 in a row against Houston. Never too early to win your head-to-head matchups. Absolutely. Especially because you no longer have the imbalanced schedule. When you get those games, you do not want the Astros to get off the mat. You don't want the Astros to dust themselves off. They're too good a team, and they've been playing too badly. You don't want to dust them off. When you get a chance to put some distance on them, there you go. That's basically what allowed the Diamondbacks to make the playoffs last year, as they had a horrific August, and they stumbled into the postseason, but they had put out so many wins early on that they were able to hold on. All right, well, this is a great day. It's a great day if you're a baseball historian. It's a great day if you're a baseball fan. And I think this is a great day if you want to respect the history of baseball. And it's going to lead me directly to today's trivia question. In 1947, that was the year that Jackie Robinson integrated the National League. And he was not the only one who played in, the only African-American to play in Major League Baseball that year. Bankhead played that year. Satchel Paige played that year. Doby played that year. But they still played the Negro League World Series that year. And in 1947, the New York Cuban Giants defeated the Cleveland Buckeyes 4-1 in the Negro World Series. What father of a future Major League legend pitched in that World Series? What father who played in the Negro Leagues, whose son went on to be a star in the Major Leagues, pitched in that series in 1947 for the New York Cuban Giants? That's your trivia question. Put it right down here in the comments. And once you figure out who that person was, it'll make you realize, wow, we could have been in a situation where this man's son wouldn't have made the Major Leagues, and that would have made baseball a little bit worse. But making baseball a little bit better with inclusion and respect. This has been Locked On MLB. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully.